important part of growth is healing from losses. If we don't experience healing from losses, then we stay stuck in losses. And the healing process, some people call it the grief process. I like to call it the healing process because it's actually how we're made is we're made to heal on a natural level. If just like we are physically, if I have an injury, if I have a cut on my arm and I'm bleeding, that cut will start healing itself by itself. I need to clean it. I need to make sure it doesn't get infected. I need to take care of it. I don't go rolling around in the mud if I'm actively bleeding because then it can become infected and cause lots of problems. But if I clean it off and I just let the body do its own work, what will it do? It will start sending white blood cells. It would start scabbing. It'll start creating new skin. There's a whole healing process. Well, do you know God designed it to where that same process happens on an emotional level? And if we take care of that process, we actually really start healing from that loss. If we don't, we can stay stuck in it. We're going to talk today about what that healing process is emotionally. Now, it's important to understand that a loss, oftentimes we associate it with a death, right? I lose somebody that's close to me, and that certainly is a loss. But there's a lot of different losses. I could be working in a job for 25 years and be suddenly let go or need to transition or retire, and that job is a huge loss. I could have a friendship of 10 years and that person moves to another city and we don't get to speak as much and it's a loss. I could have a home, right? And I lose the home due to some type of experience, God forbid, a fire or something like that. It's a loss. What's important to understand is that loss, there's no standard rule. How long do you stay in the grief process, the healing process? It depends on how much that meant to you.
Right.
If my grandfather on his deathbed gave me a watch and said, I want you to have this watch to remember me by, and it's a plastic watch, and he gives it to me, and I hold it dear to my heart, and I lose it, and I'm really upset. It's a big loss for me. You might say, oh, it's a plastic watch. You can replace that anytime. You may not understand the significance of the loss, is my point.
Right.
And so it's individual for each one of us. So as we go through this, I want you to think about any significant losses that you've experienced. It could even be a loss of innocence. It could be a loss of experience certain things that can plunge us into another level. And those things perhaps need to be grieved. They need to be grieved. So we're going to jump in and I'm going to show you the grief process. This is the grief process, or what I like to call the healing process, and it has 5 stages. The 5 stages begin with denial. And denial is my thinking process that this really hasn't happened. I haven't lost the watch, or this person really didn't die, or if they did, I'm still thinking I can call them. Or the relationship didn't end. And the emotions that go with that stage is shock and numbness. I'm just shocked out that this loss has occurred. That's a normal part of the healing process. The second stage is the anger stage. And that's feeling angry or frustrated about the loss. I could be angry with myself. I could be angry at another person. I could be angry with God. I could be angry with the situation, the doctors, the medical community, whomever. It's anger flowing and angry thoughts. HollyKem and I lead an online program called Transform You. It's an intensive online coaching program for individuals and couples. If that's something that you're interested in, click on the link below and we'll get you some information. Now back to the teaching. The third stage is the bargaining stage. And this is the emotions that go with that are guilt and shame. And oftentimes the bargaining stage is what we call the if only stage, right? If only I would have did this, this wouldn't have happened. If only the doctors would have handled it this way, she wouldn't have passed. If only I would have been a better partner, we wouldn't have gotten a divorce. If only they wouldn't have. And it's just going through that. And oftentimes what we feel on the emotional level is guilt and shame. Now, notice as we go through this, it's not a real neat process. You don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's complete. You kind of bounce around it in the healing process. I go up to shock, and then I come down to guilt and shame, and then the anger. And it's a very fluid process. The next stage is the pain stage. And in the pain stage, the emotions that go with that is hurt, sadness, depressed, lonely, and it's just your heart hurts. Mm-hmm. My heart hurts about this loss. Depending on how big the loss is, would be how long you stay in these stages. And the fifth stage is acceptance. And the emotions that go with that is peace and forgiveness. I want you to see that whenever we experience a huge loss, then it's natural to go through this process. And notice that it's very much an emotional process. It's dealing with our emotional life. The risk of not knowing how to navigate this or embrace this or be loved through it or love ourselves through it is that we can get stuck in a stage. And how many of you can all name a couple of people that you know that are stuck in the anger stage, have experienced losses and are stuck there. Or perhaps they're stuck in the denial stage and just seem to walk around numb and in shock and disconnected. Or might be in the pain stage and stuck in a depressive place of being inhibited or being paralyzed by sadness or depression or guilt and shame. So we all want to embrace this process. And as you do, you eventually move up and down and through the different stages. And then we finally move down to the fifth, which we would say is acceptance, which is peace and forgiveness. Yeah. Sometimes you begin to realize certain losses that you've experienced that perhaps you haven't had the freedom to grieve. Right. And if that awareness comes to you, then you allow yourself to give yourself permission to navigate through this process through what? Externalization. And as you do, you start moving through towards the place of forgiveness. Sometimes what we do is we intellectually try to think our way through this process and go from denial to acceptance. But emotionally, I'm stuck. Emotionally, I'm still really worked up about it. And when I think of that loss of that experience, or perhaps I can't even think about it, because when I do, it's just too jarring for me. So as you begin to learn to embrace and manage yourself emotionally, then you're able to move fluidly through this process so that we become better. You know, there's a saying that as we age, we become what? Bitter or better? Mm-hmm. And what's the difference? The difference is oftentimes those that learn how to go through the grief process become better. Right. And those who don't have the tools to embrace the grief process become what? Yeah. Bitter.